reporter for the Tallahassee Democrat and the Florida USA Today Network as our featured speaker at the Zoom Hot Topic. He has reported on the politics, people, and wildlife of Florida for more than 20 years. Prior to joining the Democrat in 2015, Mr. Call served as the managing editor of the Florida Current, the Capitol Bureau chief for the Florida Public Radio Network, and as executive producer for WTXL TV Tallahassee. He is a Newcastle, Pennsylvania native. He earned his bachelor degree at Youngstown State University and a master's degree in journalism from Ohio State University. He and his wife, Christine, raised 2 sons in Tallahassee and now spend their free time in the North Florida woods with Ted, a Black Labrador retriever mix adopted through the Big Dog Rescue. So, Mr. Call, we're ready to hear what you have to say about this election.
Well, thank you. I appreciate the invitation to talk about the 2020 election and what I think they mean. I have spent most of the past 3 decades around what Tallahassee insiders call the process. I've done most of it as an outsider, but I did write speeches as part of Governor Lawton Child's administration, and I did edit a state wildlife magazine during Governor Jeb Bush's administration, and I worked for a political consultant briefly during the Scott administration, but other than those, that all makes up less than a third of my time here in Tallahassee. Other than those brief forays, I've been a radio, television, or newspaper reporter, and I have some observations about that I would like to talk about once I get done with this presentation. What I really enjoy doing, especially with public radio, was hosting call-in programs and talking to listeners. And so I have a tendency to put things in a provocative manner to provoke discussion. So one of the questions I would like to discuss tonight is how we arrived at this point in time. And I think it's summed up in one word: accountability. But first, let's talk about the election. And understand that I work for a group, USA Today, Tallahassee Democrats' parent company, that 4 years ago wrote an editorial stating that Donald Trump was unfit to be president. And 4 years later, we have a record to examine to see if USA Today was too harsh. And about half the country disagrees with what USA Today thought. They like what they saw for the past 4 years and wanted 4 more years of it. Trump increased his number of votes by more than 16%. Some 70 million people thought his 4 years in office deserved another term. But here's the thing. Not only did Mr. Trump win Florida, but the ruling party in Florida government was also rewarded with more seats in the legislature. This with record unemployment, the stingiest unemployment system in the nation, 1 million coronavirus infections, and the party in charge gets rewarded. That's remarkable. Now, I'm not going to compare Florida Republicans in our legislature to DC Republicans. That simply would not be fair. I mean, I think I'm quite different from my relatives in Pennsylvania. But you know, the here's another thing, and another reason why I wouldn't make such a comparison. You know, the Republican legislature has done a really good job with the state finances. One may disagree with its tax and spending policies, but as stewards of the state's financial resources, they've done a good job. Florida has an excellent bond rating. The state pension system is in excellent shape. The pandemic blew a $3 billion hole in the state budget, and Florida was able to cover it. But still, in these troubled times, for the ruling party to increase its majority is quite remarkable. So what should we expect over the next 2 years? A fiscal conservative government, one that must confront an immediate budget shortfall and wrestle with a long list of unmet needs in transportation, healthcare, and the environment. The election results have been reported as a turn to the right. For Tallahassee, where we live, that turn to the right means we continue to do business as we have. Florida will continue to grow, which means that state government, education, and healthcare infrastructures, 3 of our economic drivers, will also continue to grow, just not as fast and big as they might have with Democrats. After all, government exists to spend money. Questions about how it is raised and spends money dominates most discussions at the Capitol. Democrats like to do it through government institutions. Republicans prefer to do it through private entities. Now, what was quite interesting to me in the election was our Senate race, won by now Senator Lorraine Ausley. Ausley, a veteran lawmaker with family roots in the area dating back to the 1800s, is a prolific fundraiser, as are the Senate Republicans who spent probably $1 million to block her bid to move to the Senate. And this is where it got quite interesting. They recruited Marva Harris Preston, the only local candidate in my 25 years as a reporter here in Tallahassee, to back out a request for a campaign interview. But the Republican Senate Campaign Committee spent close to $1 million to market Preston like a box of cornflakes, blanketing the airwaves with commercials, sending enough flyers to our mailboxes that one columnist suggested he had enough Preston's campaign flyers to wallpaper a room. She was a controlled candidate with few public appearances. And at the foundation of the campaign was basically a lie, an allegation that Ausley had benefited from a coronavirus relief package for businesses via the Florida Democratic Party. Now, when Preston agreed to participate in the candidates forum hosted by the League of Women Voters and the Tallahassee Democrat, she was asked about that allegation that the Ausley campaign had received CARES money. She said that when an allegation is made, it needs to be checked out, which I thought was a strange response from a former police detective who made an allegation without any evidence. And it sort of foreshadowed what's going on with Trump's attempt to overturn the election results. What, 34, 35, 38? I've lost count of the number of lawsuits that the campaign has filed that have been thrown out of court because of a lack of evidence. Anyway, Ausley won, and now just by her presence in the Senate, it sets up an opposing center of power to the Republican leadership. Her seat in the Florida House was filled by Allison Tant, a local activist for the disabled and a former chair of the Florida Democratic Party. Tant is also a prolific fundraiser, and given her career, she has a network of supporters statewide. I just can't help but think that when you have two proven leaders in your delegation who are prolific fundraisers, that you're going to have some interesting things to observe and write about. Now, I don't think that a lot of pork is going to flow into Tallahassee over the next 2 or 4 years, but we could have the beginning of something here, depending on how Ausley and Tant play their cards. Both have safe Democratic seats and an ability to raise a lot of money. They could use that money to help other candidates and build a block of votes for the Democratic coalition in the legislature. Another observation about the election is that the Florida Democrats continue to wander in the wilderness. They are beginning to resemble a biblical lost tribe, having been stripped of relevance for more than 2 decades now. I come from the perspective that every day on the Tallahassee Democrat's front page, it proclaims that the Tallahassee Democrat has been promoting democracy since 1905. Few things make me more proud than being part of an organization with that mission. But Florida Democrats are making it very hard to accomplish that goal. There has to be competing ideas for a democracy to flourish. One-party rule does not make a democracy. I recently spoke to a local Democratic club. I offered my thoughts on why Democrats took a shellacking in Florida on election day. I suggested that accountability was part of the reason why, a lack of accountability on the part of the members of the Democratic Party. Bill Cotterell, someone whom I have enormous amount of respect for, sat in on that meeting and afterwards told me they didn't hear you. They simply didn't hear you. Now, I have 2 theories why. And see if you find evidence of them in the local public hearings we've had on this past year on the extension of the FAMU Way or the Woodlawney development. In today's society, because of the internet, we have a decadence of information. And everybody thinks that they are an expert on everything, especially in politics today. Everyone is running around like they're ESPN broadcasters who know who the 236th high school football player in the country is. I mean, we know a lot of stuff, but that doesn't make us an expert on anything. We know a lot of stuff that's irrelevant, but everybody's an expert and everybody's available to go on Fox News and MSNBC or Facebook and voice these bizarre conspiracy theories that are believed by millions of voters. And it distorts the public discussion. We politicized a virus. Think about that. We politicized a virus, just as we politicized climate change. It's as if the people and scientists who have studied these issues for years, their opinions are just totally disregarded because other people believe. It's my belief, not backed by data. A person a minute is dying from the coronavirus in this country right now, and corona deniers are still broadcasting on the public airwaves. The broadcast airwaves belong to the public. They are a public resource. I heard a coronavirus denier this morning on Fox. He was outraged that California won't allow the San Francisco 49ers and Stanford play football games in their stadiums. Is everyone brain dead? He asked. Then there's Rachel Maddow. I mean, it's not just Fox. There's Rachel Maddow on MSNBC, a copy of Fox News for progressives. She went on a 2-year conspiratorial rant about Trump and Russia, but then the Mueller investigation reported no conspiracy or coordination. This is just one example. Why aren't these people held accountable for what they say? After being wrong for so often, for so long, they're still considered relevant and get to use our public resources to inject poison into public policy discussions. It's the most amazing thing. They do it because of profit. Much of political journalism today, especially in broadcasting, the main product is not information to help us be citizens in a free civil society, but it is for profit. It is partisan division disguised as news and journalism. One side focuses on the latest outrage committed by Republicans, the other, the latest dumb proposal by Democrats. The news is always a conflict between Republicans and Democrats. There are, after all, only two ideas in the universe, according to this business model. But it leaves out 40% of the Americans who belong to neither the Republican or Democratic Party. And this type of coverage also leaves out discussions of the fact that the mess that we're currently in is a bipartisan production. As Keith Arnold, a past chair of the Florida House Education Committee, once observed during budget negotiations, there aren't any virgins here. And both sides need to stop acting like they are more pure than their opponents. They need to take Abraham Lincoln's advice seriously. Lincoln once observed, talking to abolitionists about the South, he said, don't think for 1 minute, if you were they, and you were brought up and had the experiences that they had, that you would think differently, was Lincoln's advice to his own party. We have to get over the idea that much of broadcast news is a form of journalism. Much of it is simply another form of entertainment to attract eyes for commercial messages. It's not about public policy issues or information we need to participate in our government. Political news is mostly about the conflict between Democrats and Republicans, with no penalty for either side or media outlets being rarely held accountable for misinformation and distortions. And I think that contributes a lot to the divisions that we're experiencing in this country and the controversy over the election. When I was in graduate school, a classmate and I, Jerry Mitchell of the Clarion Ledger, sat in a congressional press room, and laid out in front of us were a variety of newspapers: the Washington Post, the New York Times, the Wall Street Journal, USA Today. This was in the 1990s. And Jerry, pointing to the headlines, said, "This is what will be on the network news tonight." And he was right. The evening news lineup was a compilation of the newspaper headlines of that morning. Now, I came up through broadcasting, and without public radio, I would not have had the career that I've had. So it's not that I'm a print purist. I'm just giving you my observations about 30 years in this profession. I was a successful news producer. The only time I'm aware that WTXL TV newscast won its time period. First news at 5, November 1997. And the Columbia School of Journalism and Pew Center awarded WTXL a B+ for political coverage when I was the executive producer. So please don't dismiss my comments as being from some print purist. My heart and my roots are in broadcasting. But broadcasting, I think, is the source of the mess we're in. People would rather listen to the news than read it. And they would rather watch the news than listen to it. But the only people that the public seems to hold accountable in the media are print reporters. Now, you may say people like Sean Hannity, Rachel Maddow, and Rush Limbaugh are commentators and not reporters. And I would say, no, they are members of the media. And all of us in the media, like members of the coalitions that make up the Florida Democratic and Republican parties, we are smeared by the shortcomings of the more reckless and irresponsible members of our group. No one is held accountable for what is said or written anymore about our public policy issues. And it seems other than print reporters, and quite frankly, folks, we are a dying industry, but that's for another discussion. And I'm open to questions or comments or reactions to what I just said.
Well, James, let me say that was really very thought-provoking. I think you hit the nail on the head with some really big issues. So I remind people to use the chat feature to ask some questions. And James, I'll start with the first question is, I want you to elaborate a little bit more on when you talked to the Florida Democratic Party about accountability, and you said they weren't listening. What could you elaborate on that? What do you mean by them not being accountable?
Well, the big division, or the infighting that's going on within the Florida Democratic Party or within the Democratic Party at the moment is whether the progressives cost them a golden opportunity by the Bernie Sanders factions and all this discussion about socialism. This is really fascinating to me because I have a keen interest in economics. But here in Florida, we have a lot of immigrants that fled socialistic regimes in Nicaragua, Cuba, and Venezuela. There is nothing, and they equate socialism with a lack of civil liberties. Now, Florida Democrats or progressives or Bernie Sanders supporters, they have a different definition of socialism. And I would say that it is up to them, and it is their responsibility to explain what they are talking about. That they are talking about socialism in an economic sense of about how the gross domestic product that is produced by all of us is distributed through society. They are not talking about authoritarianism or totalitarianism or the lack of civil liberties. They refuse to have that discussion. They say that that's the responsibility of the Democratic Party. And I say, no, that should be the responsibility. If you're going to bring this idea to the table, it is up to you to explain the idea. Don't scoff at the people who are frightened by what you're saying. Don't say, do you really think that Bernie Sanders is Joseph Stalin? Explain what you mean. Explain that here in the United States, we have a blended economy. There are elements of socialism. There are elements of capitalism. I mean, my God, these are people in Tallahassee I was talking to. We are the most socialistic city in the state. Our economy, the backbone of our economy, are government workers. Our city government owns the electric generating plant. I mean, socialism is government ownership of the means of production. If you own the leading energy producer in your market, and it's the government, I mean, are we unfree here in Tallahassee? They dismiss that the election results here in Florida, that the anti-socialism campaign that the Republican Party ran for 5 years in South Florida, they seem to resist the idea that it played a role in President Trump increasing his vote total by nearly 300,000. You know, and they seem to think, you know, it's like I go up to South Georgia into Thomasville and I'm talking to people about the election, you know, because they have 2 Senate runoffs. And, you know, just talking to people on the streets, they bring up socialism, that they're afraid of the Democrats because of socialism. They, and the members of the party complain that it is the party's fault that they've lost control of the message, when no, it's not the party, it's people, it's neighbors, it's going people to people, you know, and so that's what I mean by they didn't hear me. Instead, they wanted to talk about the fact that the Biden campaign only provided the Florida Democratic Party with 300,000 signs, and that was a factor. It's just that it's a lack. You know, I also come from sports, and you know, and the only way a losing team becomes a winning team is to accept responsibility, is not to complain about your opponent, not to complain about the referees, not to complain about the coach, but if you're supposed to block someone, block them. If you're supposed to catch the ball, catch the ball. If you're supposed to cover someone, cover them. It comes down to the individuals, and all of our institutions are made up of individuals.
Okay.
I'm sorry to take off on that rant.
No, that's very interesting. Here's a question from Peggy. How do we hold broadcast media accountable?
That's interesting. You know, what I was struck with, you know, during the campaign, during the final weeks of the campaign, I went and covered a lot of news conferences with local officials. I mean, if the mayor of Tallahassee is going to come out and endorse a presidential candidate, I think that's news. None of the TV stations or the public radio station were there. There was this event with Marjorie Turnbull, Lorraine Osley, and Allison Tant. And I'm standing there and I'm looking at these 3 women, and it dawned on me. I mean, gee, Tallahassee has been represented in the Florida House of Representatives by a woman since the 1980s or the early 90s with Marjorie Turnbull. I mean, I thought that was really quite remarkable. But again, you know, and it was about the election, it was about the campaign, and neither TV station nor public radio was there. Although a CNN reporter was there, you know, go figure. And really, I don't think that there's anything more. I think that the only reason why reporters and journalists have protection First Amendment right protections is because of government, because of politics, because journalism has a responsibility to inform the public about their government and how they can participate in their government, and to serve as an intermediary between the public and the experts and the government. That's what they taught us at Ohio State University. So if the TV stations and the public radio stations are not interested in covering government and politics, then why do they exist? I mean, it's that simple. When I was in broadcasting, we took very serious the doctrine that we existed to serve the public, to serve the public's interests. It was a requirement for your broadcast license to demonstrate what you do to serve the public's interests. And if not covering politics and government serves the public interest, I don't know what does. And you know, there is so much information, lies, and distortion out there. Instead of covering the food fight between Democrats and Republicans, why not examine what the problems are? Why not examine what the roots of the problems are? I mean, you know, like I said, you know, this situation we're currently in, it is a bipartisan production, and we're not focusing on it. So how to hold broadcast stations accountable? Complain to the FCC. Complain to them. Call them up. Call up WFSU newsroom and ask them, what are you doing out there? I mean, you have the right to do it. The same thing with WTXL and WCTV. Ask them, what the hell are you doing to serve the public interest?
Okay, thank you. Here's a question now from Kathy. Did you favor the constitutional amendment that would have basically done away with the parties?
Oh, the all voters vote?
Yeah, all voters vote.
I hesitate to address that because we have a code of conduct with the USA Today.
We won't tell. Don't worry. I'm only recording.
You know, I'll tell you what. It gave me pause. It gave me pause when some people started to talk about how it would empower big money. But you know, I don't know if that was enough of a reason to disqualify it. The idea somehow with the present system, we somehow have to confront the present system in that both parties have around, you know, less than 35% of registered voters as members. And that enables the more extreme factions to control the primaries, and that presents a problem. We had a close gubernatorial election, but 61% of Florida Democrats had rejected Andrew Gillum in the Democratic primary. But because there were 5 candidates, he won the nomination. And then then Governor DeSantis won on a razor thin margin. You know, that there are problems with the current system, with the primary system, empowering the more extreme elements of the coalitions. And we really do need to find a way to address that.
Here's another question from Peggy. Can social media be harnessed, and should it be?
No.
Okay, that was easy.
You know, I mean, seriously. I mean, we have freedom of speech. I mean, you're entitled to say crazy things. I mean, what we have is it seems to be an uneducated population. I mean, seriously, I mean, we think, I think we have a cultural problem. I mean, people don't know how their government works. I mean, how did that happen?
Mhm.
How did that happen? We stopped teaching civics in school. You know, Thomas Jefferson believed in a public education system as foundational for a citizens-led government. You know, he favored a public education system. And if the public education system is not going to teach our children our way of life, how our government functions, I mean, what is it doing? You know, I mean, why, how can people, I just don't, we have freedom of speech but we need, we need to, I don't understand it. I really, I struggle with where we are. I have a neighbor. I live in a nice neighborhood. You know, I live in a very nice neighborhood, and I have a retired neighbor who's from Michigan, and he's a really nice guy. You know, he's the country club type guy and everything. And after the election, you know, I'm walking my dog, and you know, we encounter him. And after the election, he goes to me, he goes, James, is it true? Is it true? I go, is what true? And he goes, now that Joe Biden's elected, the coronavirus will disappear. You know, and he smiles. And you know, and it's like, and I'm thinking, you know, and I'm thinking, you know, like, man, you're educated. You have a master's degree from Western Michigan University. You've been a successful businessman. How can you deny this? You know, that this is a serious public health crisis and not some conspiracy of the media. I
Yeah.
I don't know how. I don't know. Is that social media's fault, or is it the individual's fault? And should we be restricting other people's speech?
Well, here's a question from Mary. It says, do you see college age individuals demanding greater accountability from the media than their elders have demanded? If you can win without accountability, why demand it? And can accountability be legislated? I guess that's a three-part question. So first answer, what do you see of college age individuals? Do they care about accountability or holding people accountable?
I have a 27-year-old son who in a couple weeks graduates from law school, and he's very angry with baby boomers. He blames us for all the problems the country faces and for a diminished future that he thinks he's going to have. I don't know if college educated students are demanding more accountability from the media, but I think that they are very angry with us about the present situation in the world.
And what about, can accountability be legislated?
I think so. I think so. You know, the question is, you know, it's probably not a good idea to have the government do it. I mean, you know, that starts the slippery slope. It's up to us. It's up to us as individuals. I mean, seriously, if, you know, do you think I would still be able to work as a newspaper reporter if I had said some of the things that President Trump had said? Or if I behaved like Sean Hannity and Rachel Maddow? I would not have a job. I mean, I'm held accountable. I'm held accountable by my company. I'm held accountable by my readers. You should see some of the emails I get. And I have to be careful of how I say things in presentations like this. You know, we have a long list, you know, policy concerning Twitter. We have a long list of policies concerning Facebook. You know, what is appropriate, what is not appropriate. I'm in charge by my company. I am in charge of protecting my image, and as someone who's non-partial and who strives to tell the truth, or at least to depict reality as I see it. I just finished reading a book, this here, Hate Incorporated. You'll see it has Rachel Maddow and Sean Hannity on the cover. And I guess I should give Mr. Tabby, the author, some credit for some of my comments tonight. I forget where I was going with this. What were we talking about?
We're talking about accountability and whether it can be legislated.
Yeah.
Now, here's a good question for you. This is from Linda. What can we do besides paying full price for a print subscription, which we do? What can we do to ensure the future of local print journalism? I see it as essential to our democracy, and I'm worried.
Yes, me too. I don't know. I really don't know. You know, I really don't know. You know, we as an industry, as reporters, we had a problem. The internet came along, and we want to share information. Reporters are not business people, so we gave it away. Everything was free for so long on the internet. We just gave it away, and you know, and it caused problems for the industry. You know, we're in transition. As you're probably aware, the Tallahassee Democrat has sold its building. You know, we're without a building at the moment. We no longer have a printing press. We're in transition to a digital company, and I really don't know what the future looks like. I often wonder if a for-profit model will survive. As you know, like as what we've grown up with. You know, the world and journalism has changed so much, but you know, you have subscriber-based models, but that's a targeted audience, and that's an audience that you're playing for. I mean, it's not for the general public. If you're going for the general public, you're trying to be broad-based, and you're trying to be fair, and you're trying to be even-handed. But if you're appealing to one select group, like say your warchant.com, well, then everything about the Florida State Seminoles is going to be great, because you're supported by people who love the Florida State Seminoles. So you're not going to say, hey, what the administration is saying is just a bunch of BS. You know, I mean, here in Tallahassee, we often don't know about the flaws in a football player until after they graduate and go to the NFL. You know.
Okay, we have a few more questions, and we have about 10 more minutes to go. So thank you for your answering all these. Here's one from getting back to the election from Peter. What do you think is going to happen with the upcoming legislative and congressional redistricting? Republicans will continue to control both state houses, and the composition of the Florida Supreme Court has changed significantly since the League and Common Cause successfully challenged the Senate and congressional maps the last time around. So what's going to happen with reapportionment? What do you think?
Well, I think they have less maneuver to tinker and play with because of the Fair Districts Amendment.
Okay.
You know, I mean, there are complications. You know, we have, you know, in our congressional delegation, we have 6 safe seats, you know, 6 minority access seats, 3 for Cuban Americans and 3 for African Americans. But for, the state Senate seats, the Fair Districts Amendment will start to be, will come into play again and be help make it more fair. The same thing with the House seats. Will come to make it more fair. Of course, there's going to be shenanigans because that's part of the game. I mean, it's both sides play it. To the victor goes the spoils. But fair districts, I think, begins to make the change. Will again be felt. A lot of people, stress that the Republican dominance over the last 20 some years is because of reapportionment and redistricting. I'm not so sure about that. I mean, Florida Democrats need to start recruiting better candidates. I mean, we're like a half dozen seats, House seats, Florida House seats that were won by Hillary Clinton, but they elected a Republican member to the Florida House of Representatives. I mean, that's a question of candidates. That's not redistricting. That's not reapportionment.
Yeah. Similar to that, of course, the league works hard on voter registration and getting out the vote, reminding people to vote. And I was just doing a piece for our broadcast that we do on WFSU. And I looked at the statistics, and the voter turnout in Leon County was 75.5%, which really wasn't much better than we usually do. Whereas Collier County, Naples, Republican stronghold, they had over 90% turnout. And when you look at the Panhandle, the conservative districts had very high turnouts. So what do you think how can we do a better job as a league, or I guess it's the party's job to do it too, but to get out the vote, and especially in our own district that's supposed to be, one of the more educated districts?
Well, I set up, as an experiment, I set up a fake Facebook account under my Italian American name. And somehow that, and I've never posted anything there, it just exists. But somehow that got out, and I still have in my phone, I can show you, my personal phone, I can show you all the messages that I got from different Democratic aligned groups urging me to vote, reminding me how much time I had left to vote, and and encouraged me to participate. I had never been contacted so much about voting that I can believe. I thought that both sides did an excellent job in trying to turn out the vote. Apparently the Republicans did a much better job than what the Democrats did, and and again, I use the sports analogy. Winning teams get to work and work on themselves and look at themselves and hold themselves accountable. Or let me put it to you this way. I was talking to Daniel Uhlfelder, the Grim Reaper. Really fun guy to talk to. But what Daniel used to do when he was a student at Leon High School, on his way home after school, he would stop off at the Grove and sit on the porch with former Governor Leroy Collins and talk. Isn't that a remarkable picture, mental picture? And then of course, Daniel interned and when he was in college, he interned under Bob Graham administration, and then he went to work for Governor Lawton Childs. And so Uhlfelder and I are talking, and he goes, think about the battles that Leroy Collins fought, and think about Lawton Childs, taking on the tobacco industry. That was no easy task. He goes, but Governor Childs, he never pointed a finger at anyone. He never blamed anyone. Both men, whenever faced with a problem, they didn't complain. they said, what can we do? And what are we going to do about this? And, you know, we, instead of complaining about the Democratic establishment, because we're talking about voter turnout in Leon County, which is predominantly Democratic. Instead of complaining about the Democratic establishment, people need to look and understand that they are the establishment. That no one is stopping them from implementing any of the ideas that they think are worthwhile. Republicans go to work. They have shown time and time again over the past 20 years that they are serious about elections. They turn out their vote. It's like Evan Power told me, 2 days before the 2020 election, election day is ours. When it comes down to election day, we always win on election day. And they do. They turn out on election day. And there's nothing stopping Florida Democrats from doing the same thing. But it could very well may be, as one of the losing candidates, of the gentleman who lost a congressional seat, I think his name was Fernandez, said, people are simply not buying what we're selling. And you see that. You see, voters went and approved the $15 minimum wage, but rejected Florida Democrats. They voted to approve the $15 minimum wage and then went and voted for legislative candidates who are opposed to it. How do you
Okay.
explain that?
Yeah. Okay, well, let's do a couple more questions here. I think this one's interesting from a journalistic perspective, and I've wondered about this too. There seems to be a lot of argument about whether or not to cover Trump and Trump tweets. How do journalists decide where the line is between news and free advertising? Asked with all respect. Because I've heard, well, if you just wouldn't give him a microphone and keep, so what do you think about that as a journalist? How do you cover somebody like Trump?
So when I was at public radio, we had a really, really big argument. Governor Charlie Crist wanted to record a weekly address or a statement, maybe 2 or 3 minutes long, to be included in Capitol Report. And that triggered a really big argument among the staff, with some arguing that it is free advertising and not journalism. And others saying, well, if the chief executive of the state wants to talk to people, and if he wants to use that time to talk about puppies, the people of Florida need to know that this is their leader who is taking this time to talk about puppies. Now we have Twitter and we have Donald Trump who upturns all traditions and norms. But the bottom line is he is the president of the United States. And the American people chose him to be president of the United States. And his behavior is well known and his personality is well known. How do we decide? I'm a person who always bristles when I find out that the story I've been assigned is rooted in someone's tweet, because I don't have much respect for Twitter. But then John Morgan had a tweet today, and it's a very relevant news story. So it's difficult. How do you decide? I don't know. When it comes to a governor and a president, I almost think that no matter what they do is news. I mean, when on 9/11, when the Twin Towers were blown up, and we were all sent home from work, and and we didn't know what was going on and whether we were at war and was there going to be another attack, and we're all on edge, you know. My wife and I are watching the 11 o'clock news, and President Bush came on, and I turned to my wife, I turned to Chris and said, okay, the president's back in the White House. We can go to bed now, right? You know, when I was a news producer at Channel 27, my 6 o'clock newscast would always have the governor of Florida in it, even if the governor was just walking across the front yard. And my 11 o'clock newscast always had the president in it, even if it was just a 10 or 15-second video, because I thought it was important that the people needed to know that the leaders of our government, what they were doing and what they did today, that day, even if it was just walking across the grass.
Yeah, thank you. That's a good, I think that's very interesting and very helpful. I'm going to close. We have had other questions, some good comments here. But in the interest of time, this is a good closing question from Margaret. She says, what is your advice to the League of Women Voters in their role in educating the public on how the government works and how we can change misconceptions? Any advice for us?
Just keep at it. You all are great. I mean, I have so much respect and admiration for what you all do. No, you all, you know, you just keep on doing what you're doing, because it's very important. I thought that was very kind of you with the words that you said about the Tallahassee Democrat and partnering with the Tallahassee Democrat for the Candidates Forum. I'm telling you, that candidate forum with Allison Tant and Jim Kellinger, I thought was one of the best, most informative campaign candidate forums I have ever seen. I mean, you know, that was an opportunity that to show that we had two thoughtful individuals who offered clear alternative policy proposals, making their pitch to the people for their votes. You know, things like that are very, very valuable. How can we change misconceptions? That is a responsibility of each and every one of us. You know, I have a friend who I often argue with because he will post things on Facebook without ever checking, without ever fact checking. And I hold him accountable, and you know, and it's what we have to do. Look, you know, we have social media, so we all have access to millions of people, and if we're going to be responsible citizens of a republic, we need to live up to the obligation to shine the light on issues and on problems, and not to cloud the discussion with information and personal with misinformation and with personal attacks and irrelevant trivia about things. I mean, this is important. You know, we you know, in the CARES funding package. I mean, this is where the media really falls down. In the CARES funding package, there was $127 billion tax break for banks, finance companies, and real estate companies, you know, the folks that were bailed out after the Great Recession. And I don't recall any discussion about that $127 billion tax credit going into the CARES funding package. You know, now I'll confess that most of my attention and focus is on the state of Florida, and not only a passing thing with what goes on in Washington, but still, I mean, that's an incredible amount of money. I forget how much defense spending increased under the Trump administration, but again, it's hundreds of billions of dollars increase in defense spending. And I don't remember any discussion about that, you know, and I think these are very important things that need to be talked about. And, you know,
Well,
need to watch herself.
Yeah, well, we'll keep talking about them, and the league is, we're nonpartisan, but we do have issues that we have a lobby corps that goes up there and meets with legislators. So we're out there fighting the fight, and we really appreciate your insights, James. It's really good to have you here, and thank you for your time. And normally when our speakers come, we present them with a coffee mug or something. So I will give you a virtual coffee mug. I guess your office is closed now. We can't bring something by, but let's all give him a round of applause, virtual applause. Yay. Very, very nice. Well, thank you again. Thank you all for your participation. I'm sorry we didn't have time to get to all the comments and questions, but it was a good evening, and support local journalism, everybody. Thank you, James. And good
Thank
night.
you.